With all the anime out on the market, it's easy to forget just how long and storied a history behind it there is. And while there are a fair few older shows that got brought stateside, it's easy to miss who the game changers were. After all, when you have people who think that Cowboy Bebop is old because it was made in the 90s, the world seems pretty quick to miss the original movers and shakers. I'm sure that if you've been watching me for a while, some of these choices are going to feel pretty basic and obvious. But who knows, you might see something you never thought of before. So just what makes a character great? Well, aside from being in a good show, which is kind of necessary all told, the character needs to have had made a significant and lasting impact on the anime world at large. So, let's rev up the Wayback Machine and trek back to 1972. Tatsunoko Productions is kind of like Hanna-Barbera of Japan. They made a lot of shows that are very iconic and important to animation, but more recent attempts at revitalization have come out somewhat lax. But looking back through their catalog pops up with a who's who of classic heroes. Hurricane Polymar, Neo-Human Kashan, Space Knight Tekkaman, and the subject of today's video, Science Commando Gatchaman. Probably the most immediately recognizable Tatsunoko property, aside from Speed Racer, Gatchaman is the tale of the Kakaku Ninja Tai, or Science Ninja Team, as it's been rendered up until very recently. They're a team of secret agents who are the only thing standing in the way of Galactor, a terrorist organization that uses both exceptionally flamboyant costuming and extremely dangerous mecha to try and control important or dangerous natural resources. The show focuses on a Monster of the Week format, spanning 1 or 2 episode arcs to defeat the enemy leader and foil the plans of the villainous Berg Katsa and his mysterious overlord. The team consists of Ken the Eagle, Joe the Condor, Ryu the Owl, Jun the Swan, and Jinpei the Swallow. Their helmets are all vaguely reminiscent of the birds they're named after, and they all have specialized weapons and vehicles that they use to great effect. If any of this is starting to sound familiar, there's a very good reason for that. Created in the wake of the resounding success of Kamen Rider, Gatchaman actually formed the basis of the 5-man fighting team that would become the foundation for Super Sentai in 1975. From the helmets to the vehicle basis, this show is to Super Sentai what Battle of the Planets was to Power Rangers. Quite literally, in fact. Battle of the Planets, a heavily edited version of Gatchaman, featuring a robot called 7-Zark-7 to fill in the gaps, was the precursor to what Americans would recognize as the original Power Rangers. In addition, Gatchaman was retranslated 2 more times into G-Force and Eagle Riders. The Power Rangers connection go even deeper and weirder though, because the voice actors for Joe the Condor and Ryu the Owl in Eagle Riders showed up in Power Rangers as well. Ryu, called Ollie in Eagle Riders, was voiced by Power Rangers alumni Paul Schreier, best known for playing Bulk. And the voice actor for Joe was none other than Bryan Cranston, who lent his voice to monsters in the first season of Power Rangers.
Who messes with the blowfish, Jesse? You are a blowfish.
It took a fair bit of time for Gatchaman to get its dues from Super Sentai, but in 1991, Chojin Sentai Jetman aired. This was basically a straight send-up of the Tatsunoko production, and featured many of the same character archetypes that had become cemented by this point. Speaking of archetypes, Gatchaman is the forerunner for more than just the concept. There's a lot of inter-team relations that became stock standard through this show. For example, the leader having a foil inside the team was not a huge anime archetype up to that point. The team attack, the combining mecha, all these things that you would associate with your usual business in Sentai shows all started here. To be perfectly frank, it's a big reason why it's hard to talk about this show. It's everything you've seen before, but it did it first. It kicked off everything that we've taken for granted as stereotypical in the Sentai genre, save for the humanoid mecha piloted by the whole team. That was actually kicked off by Spider-Man not too long after. One of the major reasons that Gatchaman was successful enough to get 3 whole series made out of it, Gatchaman 2 and Gatchaman Fighter, was likely due to the surprisingly violent but intelligent storytelling that, as anime historians will note, was not exactly widespread at the time of its release. One of the things that always gets noted by first-time viewers is how dramatically violent the team gets, which doesn't come across quite as effectively in the Western translations. In the first episode alone, the violence is intense enough to be remarked upon. This was a drastic departure from things like Speed Racer for Tatsunoko, who, while no stranger to violence, was not known for lethally slashing throats with a bird boomerang. Furthermore, the series was so easily transmutable, to Western audiences because of the colorful costuming and clear lineage being drawn to American superheroes. This made it immediately palatable to American airwaves, which led to it being rebroadcast over and over again in different forms. So while most current anime fans may not be all up on who Gatchaman is, their parents might be a little bit more familiar with them. Why do they get a spot in the Hall of Great Characters? Because they were the forerunners, the yardstick by which an entire style of TV show was centered around. They were imported to the States not once but 3 times, and successfully blended American superheroes with Japanese storytelling. Why do I feel like no one knows about them? Despite several attempts at rebooting and reinvigorating the series both in the States and in Japan, it just doesn't seem to have the same cultural kick as it used to. So, even though the series has lost none of its vigor, thrilling audiences lucky enough to grab it, its continuing legacy may only be through its offspring. Likewise, picking up the series proper through legitimate means is most of all expensive and nearly prohibitively so. In spite of all that, I present to you the first in a list of great characters you've never heard of. Sometimes they are 5, sometimes they are 1. The white shadow that moves unseen, Kagaku Ninja Tai Gatchaman.